The Munich Security Conference was once more a scene for displaying Westerners' conflicts and special prioritization in international policy. While humanitarian and security crises are expanding across the world, the meeting once more showed that the main decision-makers are more concerned about their own interests than global security. One of the main topics of the conference was the composition of the participants, which was mainly composed of Western countries and their allies. This issue has raised questions about the conclusiveness of the conference in reviewing the security challenges of the world. Focus on the Ukraine war, in the absence of a representative from Russia, was an indication of its one-sided outlook. Western countries at the conference once more emphasized the continuation of military support for Ukraine, while at the same time the US conditioned its support on economic concessions and the exploitation of the mineral resources of this country. In addition to this topic, the trade disagreement between the US and Europe was another main topic of the conference. The audience at the Munich Security Conference was expecting to hear about the Trump administration's plan to end the war in Ukraine, but instead were treated to a bombastic rejection of liberal orthodoxies that have prevailed in Western Europe since the Second World War, in a speech that downplayed the threats to the continent posed by Russia and China. BBC security correspondent Frank Gardner has listed 5 key takeaways from this year's Munich conference. 1. The era of international relations in its previous form is over. The security architecture that emerged in Europe after World War II no longer exists. America is still a member of NATO, but Europe can no longer automatically count on the US to come to its aid in the event of an external attack. 2. The policy of the majority of the world community towards Ukraine has been radically revised. The United States and Russia plan to reach an agreement to end the war in Ukraine, regardless of the attitude of Kiev and Europe as a whole to this issue. 3. You have to spend more now. European countries will need to increase defense spending as quickly as possible if they are to continue to contain Russia's growing aggression. 4. Vance's speech. US Vice President James David Vance's attack on European policy was seen as offensive by main conference attendees. However, many people on both sides of the Atlantic genuinely enjoyed Vance's speech, with Donald Trump even calling it brilliant. The threat that I worry most about vis-à-vis Europe is not Russia, not China, it's not any other external actor. What I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values. Vance told a stone-faced audience. Vance repeated the Trump administration's line that Europe must step up in a big way to provide for its own defense. The Ukraine war was mentioned, with Vance saying he hoped a reasonable settlement could be reached after US President Donald Trump's surprise announcement earlier this week that he and Russia's Vladimir Putin had agreed to begin peace talks. He alleged European Union commissars were suppressing free speech, blamed the continent for mass migration, and accused its leaders of retreating from some of its most fundamental values.
At least 9 people have died in the most recent round of harsh weather to pummel the U.S., including 8 people in Kentucky who died as creeks swelled from heavy rain and water-covered roads. According to Associated Press, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear said Sunday that hundreds of people stranded by flooding had to be rescued. President Donald Trump approved the state's request for a disaster declaration, authorizing the Federal Emergency Management Agency to coordinate relief efforts throughout the state. Beshear said most of the deaths, including a mother and 7-year-old child, were caused by cars getting stuck in high water. Beshear said there have been 1,000 rescues across the state since the storms began Saturday. The storms knocked out power to about 39,000 homes, but Beshear warned that harsh winds in some areas could increase outages. Parts of Kentucky and Tennessee received up to 6 inches of rain, said Bob Oravec, a senior forecaster with the National Weather Service. The effects will continue for a while, a lot of swollen streams and a lot of flooding going on, Oravec said Sunday. The mayor of Hazard, Kentucky, Donald Mobilini, said additional flooding could be possible. Not only was it 64 degrees last night, we're getting already, expect 3 to 7 inches of snow. It could be at any time. Mobilini also said the level of flooding was a surprise. It was supposed to crest at 26 feet and it gets 30.5 feet, he said. Water submerged cars and buildings in Kentucky and mudslides blocked roads in Virginia late Saturday into Sunday. Both states were under flood warnings, along with Tennessee and Arkansas. The mother and child were swept away Saturday night in Kentucky's Bonneville community, Hart County Coroner Tony Roberts said. In southeastern Kentucky, a 73-year-old man was found dead in floodwaters in Clay County, County Emergency Management Deputy Director Ravel Berry said.
We had warning on this flood, unlike 2022, which is a flash flood, but I think everybody missed the mark because it's supposed to crest at 26 feet and it gets 30.5 feet. That's the largest flood we've had since 1984. And it was, where the 2022 flood was just in one area, this encompasses the entire county. Not only was it 64 degrees last night, we're getting ready to expect 3 to 7 inches of snow. It could be at any time.
Drone footage showed the extent of the destruction in Jabalia City, in northern Gaza, after 16 months of Israeli bombardment and ground offensives against Hamas fighters. According to Associated Press, the Israeli army launched several operations in Jabalia during the war that started on October 2023 following the Hamas attack in southern Israel. On Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he kicked off a Mideast tour in Israel. It comes as Arab leaders reel from President Donald Trump's proposal to transfer the Palestinian population of the Gaza Strip to other countries and redevelop it under U.S. ownership. On Rubio's first visit to the region as America's top diplomat, he got a warm welcome from the Israeli premier, who has praised the plan. The fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, meanwhile, remains intact after a major dispute threatened to unravel it last week. On Saturday, Israel and Hamas completed the sixth exchange of hostages and Palestinian prisoners with just over 2 weeks remaining in their fragile Gaza ceasefire's initial phase. The sides face a fast-approaching deadline in early March to negotiate the next phase, and the war may resume if they don't reach an agreement.